for joining in today to this session on stakeholder analysis. I hope it's useful for you, and I hope that at the end of this session you understand better what is a stakeholder analysis, why is it important to carry out one, and what are the tools that can help us carry out this exercise. Stakeholder analysis is usually carried out within a policy influence plan. So when we carry a policy influence plan, there are a few steps that we need to follow in order to enhance our chances of success. Usually, what we need to do is to define a clear objective, an objective of policy influence. As you can see, it's in the middle of this graph because it's very important. So this could be, for example, to improve the environmental conditions in certain cities, for example. This would be the main objective. Also, we will have some secondary objectives. All of these are going to lead and are going to be the guideline for conducting a stakeholder analysis. So, as I said, the objective will serve as a guideline for conducting a stakeholder analysis. So, what is a stakeholder analysis? It means to clearly identify all stakeholders that have an interest and/or resources that can affect or be affected by the change implied in the policy goal. So, but why is it that we need to carry out one? Why is it important to spend time on doing a stakeholder analysis? As you can see on the slide, the policy cycle has different steps, which seem to be straightforward and one follow each other. But in reality, there are many other actors that influence this policy cycle. While multiple actors intervene throughout policy process for different reasons and using diverse means, they make this process an interdependence between all the actors. And it is even more present when governmental agencies, business companies, or civil society organizations, researchers, NGOs, they all want to achieve their own missions and goals. So if we are thinking to intervene in this policy process and we have a specific goal, then it is certainly useful to know who is going to be in our favor and who is going to be against our objective. Therefore, there are some advantages that I want to mention. So why is it important to spend time in doing this? First of all, this is going to help us to identify who could either help or hinder efforts to achieve the goal, and therefore we're going to be able to outline our potential partners. Secondly, we can identify those who share interests that are actually not very aligned with our proposal. So in that case, it's very important to know who these people are and maybe set a different strategy to engage these. A third advantage could be to identify who are those people that usually support our organization and our initiative but actually don't know anything about this topic. So usually organizations or institutions have good reputation and therefore have people that will support them in whatever initiative they decide to carry out. So in case we need the resources of these people, it's also good to know who they are. A very important aspect is to understand and reflect on the level of power of each actor regarding his or her resources and the necessities and interests of those involved in the change. So if we know what level of power they have, we will see if they may be able to invest this power, the power can be different things. It's not only material resources, but it could be influential resources as well. So to know who they are will also help us to know how to approach them. There are a few things you need to remember as well. Think about those actors with whom you have already worked with in previous occasions. Usually it's very difficult to build trust with partners. So if you have done this job before, just think about who you worked with and call them again if you need them for this initiative. It is convenient also to identify those who have real capacity to make decisions and to carry out change. So not only think about people that are working on the public sector, but you can also think about social leaders or companies that are involved in the topic you're interested in. So it's not only about governmental agencies. Also, be as specific as possible in the definition of actors. Try to identify specific individuals within an organization or government agency. For example, think about ministers, advisors, party leaders, or journalists. Put the name to these people. Not only refer to the agencies or to the organizations themselves or to ministries, but in the end you're going to be talking to people. So it's important to know who are those people. Another aspect to remember is to reflect about the interests that make those actors important and relevant regarding our objectives. So what these people would like to help you out? What is on their interest? So think about these things as well. And also, identify explicitly the resources these actors have. So you're not only looking for budget, you are also looking for intangible resources such as knowledge or access to information or contacts. So take all of these into account when thinking about the actors you want to work with. To think about the resources can be an idea of the level of power each actor has to develop or either to obstacleize the change we want to achieve. So remember, this is not only to help us achieve our goal, but you also have to think about those people that may hinder your objective. So maybe you are realizing there are some people that have a lot of power that will work against you. Remember that the places of power can be very diverse. It could include legal authority, it could be knowledge or moral authority, or those people that have technical skills. So think about all of them. Be creative and try to think about all the options. And last but not least, is to remember to take time to reflect. Usually this exercise of stakeholder analysis is further done in groups or within a team. So it's going to take time, it's going to take debate. And after you're done, I recommend strongly to take some time to look upon what you did and reflect. Usually you will start another discussion as well, and many times you'll have to start over. And it definitely takes time, but it's worthwhile. So take time to reflect. So, which are the tools that can help us carry out this the stakeholder analysis? There are many, many different tools. I only pointed out here 4, but among the references I pointed out, there are others as well. And it doesn't matter which one you choose. It matters that it serves your objective. So it's not the same to carry out a stakeholder analysis for a specific project or to do it for a whole organization. So definitely this is going to be depending on the strategy you want to do. So the ones that we can see here are the alignment, interest, and influence matrix, the power chart, the stakeholder mapping exercise, and then for visual mapping. So these two that I mentioned here, Node Excel and NetDraw, are very easy to use. We are not going to talk about them more here, but in case you're interested, you can always email me and I'll send you some documents that you can read on how to use these. So let's go to the first one that we're going to look at, and it's the power chart. So as you can see, there's a table here. The first step is to state the policy goal at the very top. So you have it clear all the time what your policy goal is. So the first step then is going to point out the level in which actor works and makes decisions. So if you're going to work in a project that involves global actors, you're probably going to include the global levels, but you have to also include the regional and the local. Usually those are going to be to catalyze the change in a global level as well. So consider including the three levels. In case you're working in a specific project that is just a local one, of course, we're only going to analyze the local level of stakeholders. So then on the second column, what you need to do is to enumerate the actors involved in relation to the levels previously mentioned. So who is working at what level? Who are they? As we can see in this table, we can see the names of the organization. But remember, as I said before, to write down names. So it's very important you got the names of the people you're going to be working with or that you want to influence. On the third column, reflect about the interests that make these actors relevant. So why are these actors, why would they be interested in helping you carry out an objective? What is it that they need? What can you offer them to make them work with you? So just list here all the interests and their needs. On the following column on resources, you are going to identify which are the resources each one of the actors count with. So here we're going to think of, in some cases it's going to be budget because they have money. In other cases it's going to be credibility on certain topics, or it could be also knowledge, or it could be contact. So these are the things that you are going to use or potentially things that can help you. Once you've done all this, you can observe and reread the table and state on a fifth column if the power of this actors high, medium, or low. But well, on the next slide, you're going to see more examples where it says which is the level of power these actors have. So this table is going to help us define who we want to work with. This depends again on the strategy you are going to use. But it makes visual the actors that are involved in the policy change. So these is the target audience. Specifically to understand what kind of power they have, as you know, that's why it's called power chart. The next tool that we are going to see here is the alignment, interest, and influence matrix. It looks difficult here on the slide, but it's not. So this tool not only helps us to identify the main stakeholders, but also it suggests a possible course of action towards them. The first step to use this tool is to identify and list all the actors that may affect the policy outcome. So we have to think about all the actors that may be involved. We just list them. We don't do anything else. On the second step of the process is to map these actors onto the matrix according to their level of alignment and interest. So we'll see here an example of how this would look like. On the vertical axis, it refers to the alignment of the actors. And on the horizontal axis is the interest. So this could either be low or high or somewhere in between. So how do we know if they're interested or not, if they're aligned or not? Usually, we're going to base this on evidence about their behavior. So we have to look at their discourse. What is it that they are saying about this topic? What are their attitudes? What are their procedures? What is it that they do? So, and what are their formal and informal policy expressions? All of these things are going to help us define where we put these actors. So if we think about the alignment, there are a few questions that may help us define where to situate each one of the actors. So these are, for example, do they agree with our approach? Do they agree with our assumptions? Or do they want to do the same thing that we think needs to be done? Are they thinking what we are thinking? So someone could be really interested in our objectives, but they are actually not very keen on doing what we are doing. They think we have to go about it differently. So that would be someone that is very interested, but is not very aligned. Then, if we consider the interest, we will ask ourselves, are they committing time and money to this issue? Do they want something to happen? Are they going to events on the subject? Are they publicly speaking about this? So this is to understand who else is working on this, who else is talking about it, who else is already informed about the topic we are interested in. So if these answers are positive, then both the level of alignment and interest would be high. Therefore, most of the actors will be situated in the right top quadrant. A few tips only to take into account when doing this exercise. You should consider also the position of the actors in relation to others as well. So think about who can influence other actors if you can't access someone particularly. Also, you should note the reasons for the location. So as long as when you start putting the actors in the matrix, just note down why is it that you are positioning there, so you don't forget, because usually you have many actors and then it could be confused. So once you have mapped your actors in the matrix, the first step is to start to consider what to do. This decision-making process may be affected by the presence of too many relevant actors. Therefore, what I suggest is to prioritize and consider which of the actors identified are the most influential of the policy process. This additional dimension can be noted by marking the main actors, so you can color them. For example, here you can see some are marked with blue. So these are the most influential actors. What could be obvious, but we are going to focus our efforts on influencing these are the most influential, and they're kind of in the middle of the matrix, so they are a little bit aligned to our objectives, and they are interested. However, this is not the only course of action. You might find it entirely relevant to focus on non-influential but highly accessible actors. Or you could also allocate all of your resources to tackle the opposing actors. So this tool is intended to support this type of decision-making process. So it's not only about identifying who the target audience is, who are the targets, but it's also about helping us decide what to do next. A suggestion here that if we want to focus on some actors and we expect them to move somewhere in our matrix, then we can use arrows. As you can see, number 19, we expect the number 19 to be a little bit interested after our intervention. So that will help us visualize how we expect these actors to move within the matrix. So this matrix particularly, it's very useful, but it needs to be practiced. So if we have the chance here, I would strongly suggest you to just try to practice an imaginary goal and try to use the matrix and see if it's useful for you. But I want to make it clear again, all the tools that are available for mapping stakeholders are only useful if they make sense to you. So sometimes you might want to skip steps, or you might prefer to do it differently, and it is fine. The tools have to be useful for you and for the strategy you are trying to carry out. It's not that you have to follow step by step as it is written in a guidebook or in a handbook. So the most important thing is that you find, first of all, the tool that seems to be useful for your project, and also to try to adapt it to your own needs, and not only to follow just to follow steps without thinking about it. It's very important just to think in what way these tools can help you out. You are going to see in the last slide a few references that can give you either more information on stakeholder analysis and what is it, and also some more information about the tools.
Clara, I was wondering if before we open it up for questions, if we go back to this slide, and you've been talking this morning about this first step, the mapping of key stakeholders. Could you just briefly take people through this graphic that sort of takes them through the whole process of developing and implementing an influence plan, just so that they see how stakeholder analysis fits within a larger influence goal?
So going back to the policy influence plan, once we set up our goal, we actually understand first what is the political context. Actually, here it says analyze political context. It's also social and economic context. So to understand where are we going to work in. So it's not only, I'd like to specify here, it's not only at a country or national level, but even better if you're going to work on a specific issue in a community, to understand what are the dynamics politically, socially, and economically, and even culturally as well. So first of all, analyze the context. Once we've done that, we are going to better understand who are the actors working in this society. So here is the step where we are going to analyze the actors and how are we going to work with them. So this would be like a second step in this policy influence plan. Third step because you first have clarified which your objective is. Once you know who these actors are by using the tools that we just mentioned or using other tools as well, we might want to use windows of opportunity. What are windows of opportunity? These are certain moments that allow us to make our change possible. For example, if we want to influence certain law and we know there's going to be debate within different actors, like, say, media or civil society organizations or social leaders, we know a debate is going to take part in society. So we want to use this opportunity to let people know what our voice is and what we think should be done. So windows of opportunity are specific moments that we have to be very attentive to identify them and not to lose them. Sometimes we lose them, and then it's very difficult to actually reach actors and use our influence better. Develop engagement strategy. That's the next step. And this actually means, what is it that we want to do? What are the activities that we are going to carry out? The traditional ones would be, well, if we have research, we of course want to write policy briefs and give them to decision makers. So we have to also set a number of meetings, or we want to invite them to public events or to private events. So the engagement strategy is, how are we going to engage all the actors that we have mapped before. That is why it's also important, again, to map the stakeholders. It's going to be a previous step to the development of an engagement strategy. Align documentation with research stages. So which are the documents that are going to be delivered within the actors that we have previously mapped? So we need to know what is out there as well, what research has been done regarding the topic we are interested in. So this, of course, is going to take lots of time. It's a long period of time. And at the end of it, ideally, we are going to evaluate it. But in the meantime, along the process, we are going to be monitoring. We're going to see what is happening. So the important thing here to understand why we are mapping stakeholders is because, as you can see on the process, the steps that come afterwards are always related to the stakeholders we want to influence or the stakeholders that we want to work with. So that is why it's very, very important to know who is the target audience, who are we going to be relating with along our project, and, of course, to monitor every one of our activities so we can understand what are we doing right and what are we doing wrong.
We have a question that was sent in by Sapna Nair. She wants to know, ideally, in your opinion, Clara, how often should this process be done?
Yeah. Hello, Sapna Nair. Thank you for your question. Well, again, it depends on the kind of project you're carrying out, but definitely it should be done at the very beginning of a project. So usually I try to recommend to use a policy influence plan as a map. So although you're going to do it at the beginning of a project, it's useful to have it handy so you can revisit it along the project goals. Because you're going to have, this is part also of the map of change you want to achieve. So if you have it very handy and you revisit it many times, it's more likely that you stick to the path you thought it was going to lead to change, although it may change along the project. So when you revisit your map or your stakeholder analysis, you will realize that you haven't included someone that was important, or that you had included someone that is actually not that important, and you can change it. It's a very flexible tool. It has to be a very flexible tool because, as we know, these kind of projects are very complex and they change over time. So I would suggest to do it at the beginning of our project, and then to have it handy to change it if you need to.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other observation to make is, sometimes, as you were talking about in terms of windows of opportunity, something will happen out in the world that will draw huge attention. So, for example, the rape case happening now, where the woman was gang raped in New Delhi, has so suddenly opened a discussion about sexual violence in India that had been, simmering underneath for a long time. And so it's looking for those opportunities and then updating your strategy in light of the fact that, wow, now we may be able to actually use this new public conversation, for example, to move our goals forward. We have a comment from Nasule Neka. She says, what do you do when you're working with an organization whose mandate is conducting research and not advocacy? How should one go about influencing policy in such a situation?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Actually, when conducting research, many times our ultimate goal, it is to influence policy. So usually you carry out your research project, but then you want to use that evidence to influence policy. So influencing policy and advocacy are very similar but not the same. So what we want to do with our research piece is, once we've done the research, we go through this policy influence plan. So we want to know who might be interested in our piece of research and what kind of change we are looking for. So the question actually would be, the process would be very similar to an advocacy work, but in the advocacy work you are not actually looking for a specific change. In an advocacy work, you are you're expressing what you think should be done, but you're not specifically to find a specific thing to be done. And sometimes with your research piece, you have to decide either if you want your research piece to make a difference and to change certain policy or not. Then if you want your research piece to change certain policy, once you finalize your research, you are going to use certain tools to make that influence happen. So in that case, the influence plan will be adapted to your specific research. But the steps to follow are going to be very similar to the ones we saw here.
And I think for those who are on the call who are from the STRIVE consortium, I mean, one of the reasons that we have been encouraging people to select a particular influence goal is because our research agenda is so broad. And so what we really need to be doing, I mean, a lot of this is a very focused activity. If you're hoping to actually shift minds or programs or policy implementation over time. And so we've been encouraging folks who are doing research in, let's say, the area of alcohol to think about, well, what is the specific thing where we can contribute as a research institute in moving forward an agenda that may actually be, may actually be propelled forward by other groups, but that we can feed into. We have a couple of other folks who have sent forward. Everyone's sending us it by chat as opposed to speaking of themselves. Okay, so CIPPEC says stakeholder analysis is important for policy formulation, but the ultimate goal is to ensure that policy translates into practice. My question is, don't you think that some stakeholders with low power during formulation might be crucial for policy implementation? Take, for instance, grassroots implementers that are in an interface with the target population.
Yes, definitely. I totally agree with that. But it's important to have those into account as well. Those actors that are involved in doing the implementation should also be taken into account. That's why we saw the graph of the policy cycles. As you can see, the actors are involved in every step. So those that might not have a lot of power in the formulation might have a lot of power in implementation, and therefore should definitely be taken into account.
And I think in the visual on the policy influence graph, you'll see that the wheel, the influence goal wheel, is sitting on what sort of looks like a railroad track. It says timeline. And I think that is trying to communicate that how you think about these strategies and as you go through will change over time. So, in the beginning, you want to involve stakeholders and identify those who can help shape the agenda and be vested in it long term. As CIPPEC was saying, though, eventually, you're going to want to potentially shift the focus of which stakeholders you target in your strategy, because now you're entering the realm of implementation and different people might be involved. So that's sort of where we're trying to get the concept of time moving forward communicated in that graphic. We have another question from Kelly Susan. She says, are periodic stakeholder analyses ever incorporated as part of a project's monitoring and evaluation plan? For example, if you want to see how an intervention influences social norms over time, would periodic stakeholder analysis be a way to evaluate the effectiveness of your strategy?
Hello, Kelly. A very interesting question, actually. Yes, I think you could do that. But as I said before, it has to fit the purpose. The tools that you're using, or the stakeholder analysis in this case, has to fit the purpose. If you find a way to make show, like the stakeholder analysis is going to show if the intervention has influence or not, then you should definitely carry it out. But I think you should change some things in order to make it work. I would say that in order to monitor and evaluate an intervention, you can look at the stakeholder mapping you did before and to see if it has changed over time, and to see if the interventions you've done are aligned to the mapping that you did, and if it makes sense. I think the monitoring and evaluation in this case would be taking a look at what you did instead of using the tools to monitor and evaluate intervention. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. I think it is going to be a tool in order to revisit and see what has happened, but I wouldn't use it directly to do a monitoring and evaluation plan.
Yeah, I'll just add one comment in there. The notion of identifying some key people who you think, who you are targeting with the hope that their attitudes or behavior perspectives may change over time would be something that you could do as part of monitoring evaluation. And then you could go back and, for example, meet or interview those people over a 4-year period and see how their language, their perspective, their the people, the degree to which they're spending time and energy on a particular topic, changes over time. So the notion of kind of periodically seeking input from the same person over time, I think, could be part of a monitoring and evaluation plan, and the concept of trying to identify those people up front, but you might want to use different tools. So we have a question here. I'm going to actually say, does anyone want to be brave enough to actually say a question out loud? We have a hand raised from Richa. Can I encourage you to? Okay, so we have Richa or Sarah Morton, and then we have a written question from Isabel Pug. So if someone wants to begin speaking, great. If not, I'll go on to the written questions. Okay, so let's take the question from Isabel. She says, the stakeholder analysis is a key part of the policy influence plan, which is written based on key policy influence aims or goals. In the research uptake or influence context, how do we best go about developing this when research is not yet complete, so we cannot accurately define our aims yet?
Thank you, Isabel. It's a very good question. I think although sometimes the research is not completely finished, when you set your research priorities, you already have a goal. And actually, this is what should be done beforehand. A research topic should be defined regarding also our influence goal. So it actually is part of they're not two separate things. It's doing research and then doing a policy influence plan. So what I would suggest is when you start your research, you already have an idea of what kind of policy change you want to achieve. So I think you can definitely start an influence plan and start mapping your actors and stakeholders, although the research has not been finished yet. So both things, I think, go hand by hand. They go together. And moreover, the research topic should be defined also having into account what kind of change we want to achieve. So it doesn't matter if you don't have the final results of your research. You can definitely start working in your influence plan beforehand.
Okay. So we have a question here from Carolyn Allen. She says, I've sometimes been asked as a consultant to conduct a stakeholder analysis for an agency such as UN Women on stakeholders in the Caribbean working to link HIV and violence against women strategies. Some of the stakeholders with whom I conduct interviews want feedback from the exercise. To what extent can or should such analyses be made public or fed back to those who participate? People generally do not want to be perceived as being a negative influence. Yeah.
Thank you, Carolyn. That's also a very good question, and it often happens to me as well that people want to know after all what happens or want to have feedback. I gotta say that mainly it depends on the one that is asking for the research, for the piece of research or for the project. It's not something that unfortunately in my case that I could decide, or I think that in your case that you can decide. I think it's very important to keep informed the people that you interview, because they are giving you some of your time, and sometimes a very long time, and they want to know what's going to happen next, or what's going to be the final result. So what I do generally, this is just my personal experience, is just to keep them up to date with what we have been doing. I mean, sometimes I just have to explain that the document is not public, but it's good to take the time to explain people this. And unfortunately, the decision is going to be done by those who commissioned the work. I gotta say that's the way it is sometimes.
Okay, great. I think we have a question from Sarah, who's going to unmute herself and...
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Hi, I'm Sarah Morton. I'm from the Centre for Research on Families and Relationships at the University of Edinburgh. I'm really interested in what you might do to find out about your stakeholders. So obviously, if it's a field you're already working in, you might have really good information and ideas about people's perspectives. And obviously the power issue is quite easy to do based on people's roles. But if you're going into a new area, or maybe some people you don't know so well, how do you go about finding out about how much they agree with your strategy and those kind of questions, the alignment questions? I'd just be interested to hear about that.
That is a very common question as well. How do I find out what these people think and what are they doing if I don't know them directly? So it's a very long and hard work. So yes, it usually starts by identifying who you know that might know that person. Usually personal relationships help a lot in this kind of projects. Generally, I'd say the 80% of the results are generally made because you know somebody. Otherwise, in my case, for example, I'm doing now research on think tanks in countries that I've never been to, and I have to do all the data collection online first and see what certain people say about something, and then list these people and ask other people who they know them. So as you can see, it's hard. Fortunately, we have access, at least if we have internet, we have access to a lot of information. But it requires a lot of time. So I suggest two things. First of all is talking to the people you know that might know the targets that you've identified. But if you're working in a country you don't know anybody, then use internet as a research tool to at least find out statements or speeches or papers people have written. So either also like doing a literature review can help as well. But all these things take a lot of time.
Okay, thanks.
I would also.
Do you agree?
Yeah, that's more or less what I would have done, but I just thought maybe you had some magic trick to share.
Oh, no, sorry, magic trick for this one. Unfortunately, it seems that's the thing when you go when you present a tool such as this, it seems straightforward, but I honestly suggest people to practice and to go about it because it takes time, a lot of time.
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, it's not straightforward. Sorry.
Thank you.
So we have a final question, I believe, from Richa Ansal. Try hitting *7 to unmute yourself. We can't hear you, Mitch. I just got a note that says, can you hear me? No. Try *7 again. There, I think. Try. Okay. Then why don't you type out the question quickly? And I'll use this opportunity to just to alert everyone who's on the call. I know that some of you missed the beginning, but recognizing that a lot of people aren't able to either, they get bounced off or sometimes they're not available, what we do is we make a podcast and make these slides available on our website, so that you can actually go back and look at all of the past ones. The website, for those who are not familiar, the address is Strive, STRIVE, .LSHTM, which stands for London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, .ac.uk. And you'll see on there that all of the past webinars and learning labs are available. So I encourage people to go ahead and take a look at the last ones that they may have missed, or if you missed part of this one. Okay, so now Richa has now written out, she says, well, taking from the previous question, that if the mandate of your organization is research and not advocacy, I was wondering if it would be useful to have some concrete examples.
Yes. Let's see if I understood the question. You want examples of what research would mean here and what advocacy would be. So, if I'm not mistaken, if that's the question, then, for example, a research could be, if you're working in a national level in education, and you are carrying out a research. Yeah? No?
Let me call you back.
Oh, that's, just ignore that. That's someone else speaking.
I'll call you back.
That's something else? All right. So, a specific research would be to understand what is the budget allocated, say, for each province on education, in primary education. So, an organization can carry out a research on that to understand how it works in certain countries. And if the organization thinks that has to change to be more equal, then probably they're going to use their evidence to influence the policy and to change probably the budget allocation. But then there might be some advocacy groups only that may support that they believe in equality and that everyone should have the same access on education. So those people might do demonstrations, or they might write in magazines, or they might participate in forums or in public events. So they are doing advocacy defending a specific position. So a very good example usually is Greenpeace. They do advocacy on certain topics. So they stand for a position, while an organization that is doing a specific research, they're doing a research on a certain topic, and they're going to work directly with certain actors, with certain stakeholders, and they're going to be worried into changing a certain policy. I don't know if that was the question.
One of the follow-ups that she wrote is, are there written case studies that could be shared? And I wondered if you wanted to mention either the evidence-based policy listserv or any of the web pages that you think might be useful, we can, of course, link to them on the Strive site as well.
Yeah. Well, of course, the ebpdn has debates on these topics, and it also has a research library online and discussions that have taken place already in the last few years. So that might be useful. But then there are case studies as well, but actually many of them are online on the ebpdn library. So you could check them out there. The ODI site also has many case studies and other toolkits, so you could visit that one as well. And
so that's the Overseas Development Institute for people who aren't from this part of the world.
Excuse me. The Overseas Development Institute has on their website there is a section with all the resources, case studies, research papers, and toolkits on related topics. Let's see what else could I suggest to take a look at.
One of the things that we will do is we will make sure that on the Strive site that in addition to posting your presentation here, that we'll post links to how people can links to the listserv as well as to the ODI materials, and we can probably do a page of some of the highlighted materials for folks so that they can find them all together.